All right, 6 o'clock. We've got almost all the attendees that we were expecting. So I'm just going to start us off by introducing our guests, recapping kind of what the focus is for today. We'll go through a little bit of administrative stuff and then we'll get right into it. So thanks for joining us. My name is Jacob. I'm the Business Development Manager at Rock Cellars, and I'm just going to be moderating today's conversation all about Chardonnay. Joining us is the president and owner of Rock Cellars, Ed Madronich. She's up in my top left corner. The assistant winemaker, Allison Finley, and the owner of Cheese Please, right here in Niagara, Marissa Hartley. The topic that we're discussing is going to be Chardonnay today, and I have to say, I've spent 4 years in the tasting room, and the number of people that have walked in and said, I don't drink Chardonnay, who leave with a case of Chardonnay, it never ceases to amaze me. So it's certainly a polarizing grape, a misunderstood grape maybe, and we're going to talk all about that today. Ed, do you want to welcome everyone, give us any starting comments before we get into it?
Sure. Well, welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us. Super excited about this. We love building relationships and partnerships, not just with our customers, but with also some amazing purveyors. We are blessed to be in the food and wine business, and partnering and enjoying the delectable treats that Marissa is providing is great. Thanks for working with us. It's always a joy to share not just our products, but other products with our customers. So we're super excited about doing this tonight. And I would concur with Jacob. All the anything but Chardonnay people, eventually when they come to Rock Cellars, at least in my opinion, turn into another bottle of Chardonnay people. So they're always ABC. We just convert them from anything but to another bottle of Chardonnay. So with that, let's have some fun with Chardonnay tonight.
Definitely. All right, just a couple of quick administrative things. Like I said, we're going to chat about a whole whack of different topics, but if you guys have questions, and please do ask. There's a Q&A section down at the bottom, and we will get to as many of them as we possibly can. We may even stay on a little longer at the end if we missed a few. There is also a chat section. It's fun to see the chats, and we love the interaction with that. But if you have questions in particular, stick to the Q&A so we're not bouncing all over the place. If you are tuning in on Facebook or Instagram, because I know it's being streamed on a few different platforms, you won't be able to put questions into this. But if you want to join the Zoom, the link is in the bio on all those platforms, and you can jump right in. Last and most importantly, if you haven't already, crack yourself some wine. We're going to get into it. Pour yourself a glass. By all means, don't wait for us to get into the tasting. Sip along as we go. Whether you're going to open them all or you're just going to open one or two is up to you. But we included a sparkling topper for a reason. So you don't have to finish that bottle of sparkling. That little thing that came with it will keep bubbles in your bottle for quite some time. So without further ado, I wanted to have Marissa just tell us a little bit about Cheese Please and about yourself, just to set the scene, because a lot of these guys, a lot of the people watching right now are Flat Rock fans. So tell us a bit about you.
Yeah, so hi guys. My name's Marissa Hartley. I own Cheese Please. We're here in Port Dalhousie. We are a catering business that specializes in charcuterie, shareables, basically sitting at the table and sharing with your family, that style of catering. We're also connected to Lock Street Brewery in Port Dalhousie, and we provide all the restaurant experience and food for them. And we partner with many wineries to provide cheese boxes for their tastings as well. I was a sous chef at the Lake House restaurant, not far away from you guys, for 5 years, and then I decided to open up Cheese Please. So here we are.
Amazing. All right, so we're going to get into the Chardonnay, and we're going to start simple. Allison, what is Chardonnay?
That is very simple, Jacob. Chardonnay is a grape. So what you have in your glass is not a grape. So it's my job to take that grape that grows on a vine that clones and isolated over beautiful natural mutations throughout the years to make this amazing wine. And we use this Chardonnay Vitis vinifera grape to make a Chardonnay varietal wine. So basically, it's a white wine. It is grown all over the world because it has this amazing ability to grow in all different types of climates, survive different types of climates, different winters, different drought stresses, and then just be shown in different ways. Like we talked about tonight, we're gonna have a sparkling and unoaked and oak Chardonnay, and it also goes really well in blends, and it does well with hotter climates, maybe showing off some more tropical notes. And also really great in those cool climates like in Ontario, where it really retains that beautiful acidity. There's a mineral aspect to it, and those bright appley, lemon limey zesty characteristics come out. So
Cool. No, it's great.
that's Chardonnay.
It's my favorite grape. Ed, we talked a little bit about the beginning, or a little bit at the beginning, that it's been a polarizing grape. Yeah, it's grown all over the world. It's acreage wise, it's got to be one of the top 5 across the globe. Why did it get a bad rap for so long? Like, what's the deal with Chardonnay?
I think it got a bad rap because it was ubiquitous, right? And all of a sudden it was, everybody thought it was the same, and there's no diversity, right? We thought of Chardonnay as this bulk wine from California that was either heavily oaked or heavily sugared. And that was what Chardonnay was. And I think a lot of people felt it was that way. And just, I'll give a fun and amazing story about my wife. I was courting her at the time, and we went over to France, and we landed in Paris, and she thinks, well, I'm going to take her to Paris. I'm like, no, we're going to go straight to Chablis. And Karen, she's a chef, and she's got an amazing palate and a great taste. And we go to Chablis. It's 7 o'clock in the morning. There's a sign, Big Goose Passion, and I'm like, okay, we're going to go. You ready to drink? And so she bears with me, and we go in, and she's sitting there. She's probably thinking Chablis is what we see in the bag in the box and stuff, right? And so we're in Chablis, and she's like, fire. And she smells it and tastes it. She goes, wow, this tastes a lot like Chardonnay, but better, right? And if you know what, so obviously the fact that she could pick up Chardonnay without even knowing it was Chardonnay is an amazing testament to her palate. But it really goes to speak to, but better. And I think it's that diversity that was lost on a lot of people, particularly in North America, but it was just a generic, ubiquitous, flat, plain tasting wine. But when you get the diversity of expressions that we're seeing, right, and we're talking about, and whether it's Chablis or Burgundy or what we're doing in Niagara or other parts of the world, could be Sonoma Coast or else in New Zealand, we are looking at the place and really bringing to life a grape variety that really shows the place and shows the place it comes from. And so that's been a huge change for Chardonnay. So more and more people coming back to Chardonnay because of that diversity, because of the beautiful expression of place that Chardonnay gives.
You see it changing. There's a shift.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right.
Yeah.
And then Marissa, you're the outsider. I mean, if I said I didn't like Chardonnay, if Allison said she didn't like Chardonnay, Ed wouldn't be very happy. But what are your perceptions of Chardonnay?
I don't typically choose it first, and I don't know why. I'm hoping that will change after today's tasting. I have tasted these ones prior, and it's making me question why I never did choose it when I go to taste. So.
Yeah, no, it's totally one of those things. It's like my friend told me, I heard once that they didn't like Chardonnay, so I don't like Chardonnay, so we don't even give it a chance. But it's time to start tasting. So we're going to start with Unplugged. Allison, do you want to tell us a little bit about our Unplugged Chardonnay, how it's made? Take it away.
Yeah, so the Unplugged is just kind of an homage to us at Flat Rock, being rock stars, that whole music theme, as well as, Unplugged. When you think of an album that's unplugged or an artist, it's stripped down. It's just showcasing the true the true lyrics or the true emotion. And that's same with the unplugged Chardonnay. It's an unoaked version. So all you're getting here is really the true expression of, like I said before, the grape in your glass. So we are really trying to make this a very clean expression, a very beautiful, fresh expression, and not trying to hide. It's not hiding behind anything. It's unplugged. It's really out there and it's kind of raw.
And there's a really good question from Alan to kind of continue it with that. And it's when you're making the wine, how do you decide which grapes, which bunches are going to be oaked and which ones are not going to be oaked?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Jacob?
Yeah. There was just a question that was asking, when the grapes come in the building, how do you decide which Chardonnay grapes are going to go into unplugged or unoaked Chardonnay, and which are going to go into barrels?
Oh, awesome. That's a great question. So one of the other luxuries of Flat Rock is because we hand harvest all these grapes, they don't come in all at the same time. So throughout the harvest season, they're ripening to different bricks or sugar levels. So we typically pick our sparkling wine. We want to maintain that fresh acidity. And right after that, we pick our unplugged grapes, because when we're not adding oak to the mix, we don't want to. Oak can be very expressive and bold, and really attracts the wine. So we want to have no oak on those fresher styles of wines. We want to showcase those fresh, tight acidity, just very crisp, clean wines without the oak. Things that are a bit riper and have a bit higher alcohol later on in the harvest season can kind of withstand that oak, because they have other characters that have developed over the season that can play better with oak, versus this really crisp, appley, malic, beautiful, bright expression where we don't want to cover this up. We want this to shine, and we think that oak would just be too much. So our picking is based on the ripeness of the grapes and the style that it's going to be at the end.
So I might have gotten ahead of myself a little bit, assuming that we know what oaking actually is. Ed, like, what happens what is oaking? What happens when you put the wine in barrel? What does it contribute to the wine? And what do you look for in unplugged versus a Chardonnay, an oaked versus an unoaked?
Great question, Jacob. And I think, I just to sort of set the stage, you get a lot of people, I don't drink oak Chardonnay, right? I only want unoaked Chardonnay. And really what's great about Chardonnay is that as a pure expression like this unplugged, it can be on its own without any oak. What's also amazing about Chardonnay is it can be put in an oak barrel. So we use oak barrels. All our barrels are French oak barrels that are toasted, and they start to impart some, call it not fruit flavors. So the vanilla, the butterscotch, the caramel flavors. So it's basically allowing that Chardonnay to age in our case, French oak barrels, that actually adds some complexity, not just oak flavor, but also aging of the wine. When you're aging in stainless steel, the wine typically doesn't age really at all while it sits in stainless steel, but oak and breeze gets some micro-oxidization and soften the wine. So there's a couple things going on when you are oaking a wine and you're oaking it in an oak barrel that ultimately changes the flavor, the texture of the wine. And so they can be from the same vineyard, but give two totally different expressions of that vineyard and of that.
Now, do you have all the wines there?
Do I?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned texture, you mentioned flavors. Do you want to just take both of the wines, everyone that does have them, and just kind of talk us through what we should be feeling and why, like, what's coming from the oak, that richness, that creaminess, the crisp acidity, things like that.
Sure. So for me, oak is a couple of things. And if you're tasting these side by side, which is always a good thing to do, and Allison, jump in right after me, because I'm sure I'll miss some of the winemaking side of it. For me, when we're aging an oak, and this is one of the things that people, I think, don't recognize. I always think oak is sort of 50% of what we're trying to do for a wine, and that's impart that oak flavor. So that oak is the toast characteristics, the caramel, the butterscotch. Those are the characteristics that you're going to get from the oak. but aging in oak also imparts the flavors. So you get a little bit of micro-oxidization, so that impacts the flavor of the wine. You also get a softening of the wine, and you also have the lees, so the amount of dead yeast cells that are in the barrel, and we will stir the barrel. We'll just get a bar and we'll stir the barrel, which stirs up the yeast cells, gives it that biscuity, yeasty characteristic, and that also gives it texture. So when you're tasting the unplugged, it's going to be a little bit leaner, a little bit crisper, a little bit, I don't want to say sharper, but a little bit brighter. And the oak Chardonnay will have a softer, rounder texture in your mouth. It'll feel a little bit more viscous, but it'll also have a little bit more complexity of different flavors rather than that real pure fruit flavor. Allison, what else did I miss? I'm sure there's tons there.
There's tons to unpack there. So a big thing about this is that not all oak is the same. So when we say oak, we don't just mean 30 barrels that look identical, have the same age, same toasting, whatever. Flat Rock's been around for over a decade now, and the winemakers that have come before me have really developed an oak portfolio, basically, for me now to play with. And we've tried different coopers, what people who make the barrels are called, and different coopers that work with our vineyard that we know because we've tried them over the years, what does and doesn't work. So now I get the benefit of coming in, after all these years of people trial and error, and just it's so dialed in. So we have different French oak barrels. They're all different ages as well. So a new oak barrel means that it's never had wine in it before. It's toasted by these coopers, and it's going to have a lot bigger impact on the wine in that barrel. Then again, one of the amazing benefits of Flat Rock is that people before me have had the forethought to keep neutral oak around for well over a decade as well. So these barrels aren't imparting any flavor at all on these wines. They're just allowing that micro-ox, like I was talking about. They're creating a small, tiny fermentation vessel. They're really beautifully interacting with the wine, good lees contact. Lees is basically the dead yeast cells that the wine will be aging on. And so what I have now is a spectrum of oak to taste and trial, and it creates this beautifully complex wine versus something that's heavily oaked and in your face, or something that doesn't have any oak at all. I have all these things to kind of play with, and that's one of the only tools winemakers have is these oak barrels. And then another big thing that happens in oak, and Ed was talking about the brightness and the freshness of the unplugged. During that time in barrel, these wines go through malolactic fermentation. Now that's not a fermentation like alcohol. It's actually just a bacteria that naturally occurs on grape skins, is converting malic acid, a kind of a harsher acid, like you bite into a Granny Smith apple, into a lactic acid. It's a bit softer. So again, that's that similar, softness on the palate. You're not getting in the unplugged, but you're going to get it in the estate Chardonnay.
And I would imagine that some of those textures tie into what cheeses you picked, Marissa. Do you want to tell us a little bit about your pairings and why?
Of course. So for the sparkling, I chose the Gruyere because it really brings out the elegancy of the Gruyere. You don't want too powerful cheese with the sparkling, and it's not the average cheese that people would pair with the sparkling. So I wanted to give something a little bit different, a little bit more milder, and then it brings out the nuttiness and the butteriness of the Gruyere. And then with the oaked, I chose Brie. I feel like the triple cream is it's a very common choice. And then with the unoaked, I chose the Stilton. But I do suggest that you try it backwards as well, because Chardonnay is very easy to pair with cheeses, and you really can't get too wrong. So after the tasting, I do suggest trying it backwards. Try the Stilton with the unoaked and the Brie with the oaked, or the opposite, and it will let me know which one you prefer.
Well, and I'm gonna toss a poll up here right now, and I'm just curious, for those of you that have the wines, I'm curious to know which one you prefer. But even if you don't have the wines, I just want to get a general idea of perceptions of unoaked versus oak. So I'm just going to leave it up for a minute. It should be up on your screen. Yeah, and it always bounces around.
Jacob, while people are answering that, can I just, I want to tell a little bit of a story. I've got a couple Matt Kramer stories today that it just happens to be, both these stories are related to Matt Kramer. And for those of you who don't know, Matt Kramer, it was a columnist in Wine Spectator. And he's been to Flat Rock Cellars a few times, very much enjoys our wines. But I remember the first time he came to Ontario, he went to the first winery. And I can't remember, he was going to 5 wineries, and we were sort of, I'll say, maybe winery number 4 or 5, I can't remember, but he goes into the first winery, and the winery says, and this is his first time in Ontario, he says, Mr. Kramer, we want you to try our Chardonnay. And he's written a book on Chardonnay, and his belief is there's very few places in the world, Burgundy being one, California not being one, where Chardonnay shows its place. And so it's not that he says they make bad Chardonnay in California, it's just you can't tell one from Napa, from Sonoma, from somewhere else. But in Burgundy, obviously, he believes you can. And he comes to the first winery, they say, Mr. Kramer, can you try our Chardonnay? He's like, oh, more Chardonnay, right? Like somebody's trying to convince me about Chardonnay. And he tastes it, and he says, maybe there's something here. He goes to the next winery, and he says, Mr. Kramer, will you try the Chardonnay? And he's like, oh, again, Chardonnay. And he tastes it, and he notices again, there's something more to what he's tasting from Ontario Chardonnay. And then he goes to the remaining wineries, and before and he tells the story, obviously, but before he can even, the winemaker or the owner can say anything to him, he goes, I want to try your Chardonnay because there's something here. And so he really believes, obviously, in Niagara Chardonnay and how it reflects the place and how powerfully it reflects the place. So it was a great sort of testament to what we're doing with Chardonnay, I'll say in Niagara, particularly on the bench.
And I'm curious, and Marissa, I know that you don't, I don't think you make the cheese, but is there a sense of terroir and kind of a difference in cheeses from different parts of the world that you pick up on in various cheeses?
Yes, so even tonight, you have the Gruyere from Switzerland, the Stilton's from England, and then the Brie is from France. So it's a little bit all over. And I think as you taste it, you kind of get the country's taste in them. Like Gruyere, Switzerland, it's very mild, and then the Stilton is very strong, and the Brie is very rich. So I feel like if you relate that to the countries, then it pairs very nicely.
Yeah, and I mean, again, I don't know, but I would imagine that there's something to be said for like animals raised near salt water and being in humidity and eating a certain type of grass, and I'm sure it would come through in the product. And that's kind of why they say like if it goes together goes together for food and wine pairings. Grapes that are grown near the coast would probably go really well with animals or fruits and vegetables, anything like that live in the same area. And then kind of on the same topic as terroir, Alan asked another really great question. And I know you'll want to take this.
Give this one to me, please.
We hear a lot about French oak. We hear a lot about American oak, but we have a hell of a lot of trees here in Canada. Why not Canadian oak?
Well, that wasn't the question I thought you were going to ask. Okay. There's another one there that I want to answer too when it comes around. But look, I think there is Canadian oak out there. And some wineries use it. I've tried wines with Canadian oak, and I think it's like anything. I think there is a learning curve that it takes for the coopers here in Canada to be able to use and make and basically season. They call it seasoning the oak. I find Canadian oak tends to be a bit resiny for me, a little bit piney, a little bit sappy, and so it hasn't married well with what I think we want to accomplish at Flat Rock Cellars. So I know there's a Canadian oak, and I think Canadian oak will get better over time as the people here making it learn more about how best to dry out. Because like a fire, you don't just cut down a tree and try and burn that. You got to let it dry out for a year. The same is true of oak barrels. You got to get rid of the sap and the moisture in the oak. So I think it'll be a matter of time. I do think there's tons of potential, but I don't think Canadian oak, in my opinion, quite yet. I don't know what Allison's thoughts are on her using Canadian oak.
My understanding of this is always that Canadian oak is kind of a hybrid of American and French, and we don't use American on our shards because that's not the style we're going for. So we do the French because it's a tighter grain, and the American oak is a larger grain. That's why you get those bigger vanilla notes. They go really well with the cabs and the syrahs and the bigger reds that can handle that bigger extraction. My understanding was the Canadian was kind of in the middle, and if we're going for that tight grain, finesse, very subtle play with the oak, we're just going to go with French for now. And like Ed said, young industry, we all have learning curves, and yeah, I'm very excited to try it in the future. Absolutely, it's not off my radar. That's for sure.
Cool. All right. Before we get into what I'm most excited to try, the sparkling, I just wanted to let everyone know that the estate Chardonnay, so the oaked version of the Chardonnay, it's actually on sale right now. It's $2 off, $17.95 a bottle, but just until Saturday. So you can get that at the winery, you can get that at the LCBO. If you love it, grab it while it's reduced. Now onto the riddled, or I should say, any other comments between oaked and unoaked Chardonnays before we jump into sparkling wine? That's a whole nother can of worms.
Jacob, I'm just looking on the questions. I do want to answer Alan's question about the comparison between Niagara-on-the-Lake and the bench. Okay. And because I do think it's an important, right? And really, Alan, from my perspective, the answer is one around soil and climate, drainage. I used to manage Inniskill, and I remember there's years when there was still a foot of water in the vineyard in June just because of the heavy clay and the lack of drainage and the flat topography of the land, right? Versus on the bench where we have great draining soils because of the limestone. We've got a slope, obviously. We've got great airflow because it's where sort of really cool air meet the rest of the escarpment. So there's a bunch of things that I'll say make the bench, and you highlighted, I think, some of the wineries that stand out on the bench, and the difference that it makes, and just the place, how different the place can make. And that really is a soil, rock, slope, topography difference that really impacts, obviously, the quality of the wines, character of the wines. And, I always listen a little bit to Burgundy. Put a Burgundy from Dijon to Beaune on the N74. On one side of the road is this beautiful slope full of vineyard. And on the other side of the road is this flat river plain that's heavy clay soil. There are no grapes on one side of the road, and there are grapes on the other side of the road that are $300, $400, $500 a bottle. And you think, why don't you just plant it on the other side of the road? And you can get $50 a bottle, and you'll be making lots of money. But that's the difference. That's how much one side of the road versus on a slope with great soil and great drainage and great airflow, how much of a difference it makes. It's literally feet, not miles or anything like that, that can make a difference to what.
And then one more question came in about oak. So before we head into sparkling, does using oak change the longevity of the wine? Allison, do you want to take that? The aging ability of it?
So I think that it does impact the ageability of the wine. So what's happening when the wine is in oak is it's having an exchange with oxygen. And part of winemaking is do your absolute best to not let oxygen touch that wine, except for some reason in French oak barrels where it's okay. Like every other part of my job is nitrogen, dry ice, topping, like everything. And then oak, somehow the oak's allowed to let an exchange happen. So, but what's happening there is it's a beautiful, tiny, tiny micro oxygenation of this wine where it's binding with volatile aromas, it's binding with chemicals and phenols in that wine to stabilize it. It's really important also in red wine too, with stabilizing color and stabilizing tannin. So oak absolutely helps with the oxygen or aging of that wine, unless you're making a wine, unless you're paying attention to it. So unless you let it go and you're not chopping it, you're not doing proper oak treatment, then you're creating a very poor wine and it won't age. It won't age for you. It won't be pretty. But if you are really, really caring about that wine in that barrel, oak does help a lot, I find. Ed, if there's anything else.
Nope.
The other thing that helps wine, and that I talk about all the time, is acid. I think acid is our biggest friend, not only with Chardonnay and Riesling, but Ontario. I don't have the 2019 unplugged here. I actually have the 2018. I thought I would just open it to see. I'm obsessed. It's like, this wine, you know, we make to sell fresh, and I'm laughing 2 years on now. It's so beautiful. So I'm really excited about that acid. And I think that it has no oak attached to it. And I wish I had 6 more bottles so I could see where it's going to be in 5 years.
On to the bubbly. Marissa, so my New Year's resolution this year was to drink more sparkling wine, like just for the sake of drinking sparkling wine, because I was always like saving it for a special occasion or opening it at New Year's or whatever. But it's such a versatile wine. How do you take that into account when you're thinking about a cheese pairing? Like, do the bubbles affect it? Does the acid affect it? What?
So especially with the sparkling and the bubbles, you really don't want to get an overpowered cheese. You really want it to complement the taste. So I would recommend going for the more mild, earthy cheeses. So like Gruyere. For Canadian, I would highly recommend the Guns Hill, the Five Brothers. Anything that is most likely wash rind will give that really stinkiness to the outside smell, but the flavor will go earthy and mild. That will pair nicely with the sparkling.
I wish I knew this, but I don't. Washed rind means?
They're basically washing the mold on the cheese, and then that's how the mold grows. So a lot of cheeses, there's the wax rind, which you'll be able to peel off the cheese. There's the semi-soft or the bloomy rind, which is your brie. So your wash rind it's edible still, but it's kind of a little bit stinky, like mold or musty.
So romantic. You talk about mold, we get to talk about dead yeast. It's but they really do make incredible flavors. So for this tasting, we are pouring our 2017 Riddle. It's our sparkling wine, traditional method sparkling wine. And Ed, I know that there's a lot behind this wine, from the name to the capsule to everything, and I'll let you take it away.
Yeah, so I before I start, and maybe I'll throw it over to Allison, and then maybe come back to me after Allison tells you how the wine's made. But one of the things that I want to talk about, I don't know if people notice, I had 2 Matt Kramer stories. So you'll notice I'm pouring it in this big, wide mouth, big burgundy glass, and you must be going, "Oh my God, no! This is sparkling. It's done in a flute." And I just want to read what Matt Kramer said about this, because I think it's again breaking some of the myths of wine. We are so trained that this is the way you must do it. Let me just read Matt Kramer's words, and I'll just to explain why I'm drinking out of this glass. Using the wrong glass for sparkling wine. Is it still possible in our wine savvy era to be talking about the wrong glass? Wasn't that sort of thinking discarded with the etiquette book, right? You think, thanks to the unrelenting efforts of George Riedel, that all of this is old news. We know pretty much about every wine glass, never mind our personal opinions about this shape or that. Yet one wine appears exempt, sparkling wines. It seemed like a done deal. We congratulated ourselves replacing those old wide mouth coupes with the correct narrow flute glasses, and that ended the matters. Not so. Let me tell you a story from the tasting trenches. This past July, I was tasting at Rock Cellars in Niagara Peninsula area of Ontario. Out comes a sparkling wine called Crown, a blend of Pinot Noir and Chardonnay. It was aged in neutral oak barrels for 8 months and spent 5 years on the lees before being disgorged. That's a long time for sparkling wine to remain on the lees. In Champagne, 1 year on the lees is required for non-vintage cuvées. Vintage dated champagnes have a minimum requirement of 3 years. So we taste the wine, which was served correctly in quotes, in flutes. The wine seemed exceptionally good, dense, dimensional. and offering what can only be called cool climate finesse. I was impressed, but I wasn't getting all of what I was certain was in there. Could I have a different glass, I asked, as politely as I could. It needs a much bigger glass. My host, that happened to be me, seemed baffled, but willingly obliged, bringing out a large red wine type glass. I said nothing more, and once they tasted their own wine in a much more appropriate, larger glass, nothing more needed said. They professed incredulity and declared themselves converted on the spot. I'm not sure that's how it happened, but I'm sure it makes for a good story. But again, it really did happen, and it really did sort of convince me that, you know, sometimes our preconceived notions of that narrow flute glass is not correct. And this big, beautiful, wide open glass is really the way we should be enjoying sparkling wine. So if you do have a chance to try it, give it a go. I don't know if you're sitting at home with your flute, but if you have a big glass like this, give it a go and see what happens. And I'll throw it over to Allison to answer the question on how we made this wine, and I'll come close the loop on it.
Yeah, so I don't think that 24 minutes could ever encapsulate how amazing of an accident traditional method sparkling was, but I will try. So this particular wine was hand harvested, whole cluster pressed in our cellar, picked earliest in the season to maintain that bright acidity. And this actually was fermented in barrel. So that's something that unique that Flat Rock does, is we age our sparkling base in barrel. Typically it's done in stainless steel, but we find that it really adds to the complexity of the final product, where in most cases for sparkling wine, traditional method, it's fermented in stainless steel, and then the secondary fermentation is where you get all that beautiful autolytic characteristics. We kind of take that idea and turn it on its head a bit. Why not have the base wine also be complex and interesting and deep and have some interesting notes to it? So we ferment a table wine to dryness, and then we build up a tirage, which is a wine, sugar, yeast mixture, and dose a little bit into the primary fermentation. And when it's all mixed together, we put it back in this exact bottle and then cap it and don't look at it for years. And what's happening then is that a secondary fermentation happens, and during fermentation, carbon dioxide is produced. So instead of off-gassing like all the other ferments that would happen in our winery, it gets trapped in this bottle. So that's what creates the bubbles for you. So as it's sitting there, gone through secondary fermentation, created beautiful bubbles to enjoy your sparkling wine, all those dead yeast Jacob was talking about earlier are actually playing a massively important role, and they are autolyzing, which means they're breaking down and releasing thiols and esters and all these cool little flavors that are giving you those bread and yeasty notes, those buttery notes that I can't do. That's all the dead yeast babies. So traditional method sparkling is just so cool and so I think important. I think we just need to never stop doing this because it's such a great product, and Ontario does it so well, again, because of our growing season. Maybe we can't always ripen, those crazy big cabs, but we can always ripen sparkling wine because we get to there in August, September, and we have that stunning acidity, those warm days, those cool nights that really retains that. So yeah, I think that traditional method sparkling is just a knockout for Ontario.
Agreed, Allison. And so I just wanted to sum it up in terms of how I look at it from Flat Rock Cellars. And to me, this is really exemplifies what we do at Flat Rock Cellars. And what I mean by that is, for me, making a great bottle of wine is not doing one thing well. And I know Allison knows this. It's about doing a whole bunch of little things along the way as well as you possibly can. And what we do to make sparkling wine is not what, I'll say most sparkling wine producers do. We do what the top champagne houses, the Krugs, the Bollingers do. And that is, we age this wine in oak barrels, which is very unusual. We then leave it on the lees for extended period of times, 5-6 years sometimes for some of our wines, which is comparable again to those the Dom Perignons, the Krugs, and things like that. And so this wine, to me, typifies and exemplifies all the little things that we do: hand pick, hand sort, gravity feed, oak barrel age, the whole 9 yards to make a great bottle of wine. And what it translates to is, ultimately a great wine. And we tend to get a lot of global recognition. This I like to highlight this one. I know I see Jacob nodding, but we got a 95 from Decanter magazine, right? And I know as a Canadian, we always want to get success somewhere else. So think about that. We are being tasted blind against the best sparklings in the world because it was the Decanter World Wine Awards. So you're in with the best champagnes, the Krugs, the Bollingers, the Dom Perignons, the Moet and Chandons, and everything. And there is Flat Rock Cellars scoring above 95 with our sparkling wine, blind tasted, with all of those right beside us. And I think it's a testament to the work that Allison and team do. It's a testament to the place, and it's a testament to, I think, what we can accomplish where we are in Niagara. So that's super exciting.
And for a tenth of the price. But okay, so I was going to ask this anyway, but I see a question that came in. You do all those things: hand pick, hand sort, barrel ferment, extended lees aging, just like Dom Perignon and Krug, like you said. But then you put a crown cap on it.
Oh. I'm assuming that one's directed at me because I am the
all of those. Yeah, like if all of those guys are doing it and then they put a cork on it, why are we putting a crown on it?
Right. So the reason why they put a cork on it is for marketing purposes, because their production method demonstrates that that is not the best quality decision to make. And the way they make the wine proves it. And I just want to say our mantra at Flat Rock Cellars is just make the best wine possible. We don't have any preconceived notions that it's got to be a cork or we have to use a cork. We obviously don't, because it's not as good for the wine. And so why I mean they prove it for us is Allison just spoke about the method of making sparkling wine, where we take this base wine, add some sugar and yeast, put it inside the bottle, and we let it age in that bottle for a period of time. Dom Perignon is 6 years. How does Dom Perignon age that wine? What is the closure on that bottle for 6 years? If cork was the best closure, they would of course use cork, right? Because why would you use something else? You're getting $300 a bottle, so the cost of the cork is insignificant into your perception of quality. You want to make the best possible wine, but they never ever. There is not a single producer that uses a cork during that process. They all use crown cap. The reason why they use crown cap is because they know if they use a cork, a certain percentage of the wines will be ruined by cork taint, by oxidization. So they use a crown cap because they know 100% of the wines will be preserved perfectly, whether it's a year or 6 years. So the crown cap is a better closure. The French, the champagne houses all prove that point. The only reason they take the cap off and put a cork in it is because you as a consumer expect there to be a cork in it that you can shoot off. Now, at the end of the day, crown cap is better quality, so no cork taint, no oxidization. It's safer. It doesn't go shooting out and hit you in the face. It allows you to age the bottle standing straight up. Everything about a crown cap is better for that wine. And if you still want to shoot something off, you can always saber a bottle. We don't use sabers here in Canada. We use axes because we're Canadian, not French. And there's
hockey skates.
Yes, or hockey skates, or anything else that'll saber that'll cut the end off. But that's really why we use a crown cap. It's not about marketing. It's not about being able to shoot something off. It's about the quality of the wine inside the bottle. And this allows Allison and I to guarantee that the wine that Allison makes is the wine that you're going to be tasting.
So, Marissa, I have a question for you that I kind of thought of as we were talking about this, is that, we know that the sparkling wine gets better, well, develops flavors as we leave it in the bottle. So the crown that Ed was reading about was 5 years. How do cheese, like I always see 3-year aged or 5-year aged on cheese packaging. How do the flavors develop in that sense. And I was also curious, what's the oldest aged cheese you've ever seen?
Great question. So the more aged a cheese is, the bolder it is. So if you take even cheddar or Parmesan, for example, the oldest cheddar or Parmesan that you've probably ever seen has had like little salt crystals in it. And when you take a bite of it, it is so rich, it's almost like a dessert, which is why cheese is also used in dessert courses at some restaurants. So the older it is, the more salt crystals are in it, and you won't be able to get the nice slices out of it. You'll really have to just get chunks or really whatever you could get while cutting it. The oldest cheese that I have seen was actually at Cheese Boutique in Toronto, and they have a very old Parmesan there. I believe it's 80 years old. Don't quote me, I may be wrong, but they have, I believe, the oldest Parmesan in the world there.
In Toronto.
Yeah.
Dare I ask how much that costs for a
I
sliver?
don't think you'd even be able to lift it, honestly. It's a very big wheel. I believe, like, if I've seen some of the cheeses that I've seen are fairly expensive, you probably would not be able to afford one of those ones.
Fair enough.
Jacob, you can't even smell it. That's how expensive it is. You can't even look directly at this cheese, okay? Don't even
Yeah, it's very intimidating.
And that's crazy. I did not know that was a thing. Like, I don't think of food products as being able to last for 80 years. And you may know or you may not, but what is it in cheese that enables it to age that long? Like, we know in wine that it's the acid and the tannin and the sugars and being enclosed and kind of protected. But cheese certainly is not. I'm just curious.
There is bacteria in cheese as well. So certain cheeses like the brie, you won't really be able to get after 3 months. It's not as good. But the harder cheeses, it's basically mold. So the longer it is, the moldier it is, but the more tasty it is.
Fair enough. Interesting. Okay, so I know we're getting up to the last quarter, and I've got a lot left to get through. But Marissa, besides cheese, favorite sparkling wine pairing? You're cracking a bottle of bubbly, besides pairing it with New Year's Eve?
I don't know if I've cracked bubbly other than New Year's Eve, to be honest. I'm not a sparkling person, but this one is very good. I can definitely taste the oakiness that you were talking about it being aged. So I'll get back to you on that.
That's a little complexity, but that's exactly what I was talking about at the start. That, like, I just need more. I want to drink more sparkling. So Ed, what's your go-to, like, kind of maybe off the beaten path sparkling pairing?
So I always say this, it is one of the greatest pairings on earth, and it is Miss Vicky's regular potato chips and sparkling wine. If you have a bad day, come home, grab a bag of Miss Vicky's regular potato chips and a bottle of sparkling wine, and it will instantly cheer you up. It is one of the great food pairings ever. And the reason why is sparkling wine has great, bright, fresh acidity, and the chips are oily and salty. And the oil and salt and acidity and freshness go together, and it's absolutely delicious. Give it a go.
Allison?
Oysters. I know that one thing that I always get spoiled with on special occasions is oysters, and I put a request in. I'm like, all right, time to eat oysters. This is what's happening. Get oysters. Oysters and sparkling obviously go well together. It's pretty classic pairing, but it's also just like a signifier of something to celebrate. And I know that I drink sparkling wine not just to celebrate all the time because it's an amazing product, but I know that oysters and sparkling are just kind of my, like, okay, this is like a happy, special moment. Whereas like Ed's is like, bringing you up from a down moment, whereas mine's like a premeditated special moment. So yeah, sparkling is just like a ubiquitous, perfect pairing for a lot of things, actually.
Yeah, and I just see Jacob Derek on there just comments, crisps and sardines or caviar. So sardines, caviar, there's the salty and and the crisp because of that oily characteristic. So it's very, very similar, but that's exactly that's what makes sparkling shine. Sure, absolutely.
Yeah. And somebody said they want to see us saber with a skate. I promise you, when we open again, we will be celebrating at the winery. We will saber a bottle with a skate, hands down. Now, there's a couple of other questions that are here just around Chardonnay in general. Ice wine, typically made from Vidal, Riesling, Cab Franc is the comment. Why not Chardonnay as much? Allison, as the winemaker, you want to take that?
Yeah, it's definitely a couple reasons. And to be completely honest, there are Chardonnay ice wines out there. One reason I would just personally think is that it's needed for other things. It could be a logistical thing in the winery where, you know, it's needed to go into a sparkling program or, you know, an oaked program. And when you take grapes out for ice wine, you're really taking a gamble there. It's really a risk. So all of a sudden you're now, you know for a fact you're going to get a lower yield because when the grapes freeze thaw, you're going to lose moisture and you're going to press off only get about 20% yield versus the 70 you could get as a table wine. And you're also, you know, battling rot, you're battling birds, you're battling a lot of things. And I think that Chardonnay doesn't have the same thick skin that some of the other grapes have either. You know, it's more susceptible to disease. So when people do make ice wine out of it, the Brave make ice wine out of Chardonnay, and it has that beautiful acidity to you know hold up to all that sugar. But I just think that it's not as common because it is a lot bigger risk on the vine as a product.
And then one more question for Ed. I know what when you guys are tasting for the blends for our Chardonnay, which we tasted, and for our Rusty Shed, which is our reserve, you literally taste every single barrel of Chardonnay in the building. And somebody said, besides the obvious growing and the harvest, like we know 2020, everyone's excited about the 2020 vintage. But what are the telltale signs that a wine will be amazing or a particular barrel will be amazing when you stick your nose in the glass?
So I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact on this, because one of the things that I think we always try and do is we try and say this vintage is better than that vintage. And I'm a huge proponent of each vintage is different. You know, I find it, we all want that great vintage. And don't get me wrong, we like certain things about certain vintages. We want warm and dry in general, because if you get wet and cold, it doesn't ripen properly, you might have disease pressure and things like that. So certainly we know going in to a harvest how the vintage is going to be because of the health of the grapes in most cases. But what makes a truly great vintage is really personal. And I always like to compare it. We've had a couple vintages back to back that in 2 different years that were very similar. So 2007, 2008, and then 2012, 2013. 7 and 12, hot, dry, big vintages. 8 and 13, cooler, wetter vintages. And the wines from both vintages, or all 4 vintages, were great. They were just very different. And so, you know, the 7s and 12s more, call it Napa-like. The 8s and 13s more Burgundy-like. And, you know, if I said one was a Napa Chardonnay and one was a Burgundy Chardonnay, how do you pick between the two, right? They're just different vintages. And, you know, for me, I love to celebrate the differences rather than pick winners or losers. And that's just the way I look at vintages in general.
Fair enough. Very diplomatic, but very fair. Okay, so just we're going to begin to wrap things up. If you have more questions, definitely pop them into the Q&A. But Marissa, you gave us some amazing cheese and wine pairings for these 3 particular wines. But just if people are, you know, out shopping, what are some general rules of thumb? Just some parting words of wisdom. They're looking at the cheese fridge and they don't know what to do, you know.
So you want to match the intensity of the wine with the cheese. And one thing I go by is the stinkier the cheese, the bolder the wine. So if you have a lighter wine, go for a less smelling cheese, and then a heavier wine, go for the stinkiest one you can find.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And we've actually, I know that you and Marley, our hospitality manager, have been working pretty hard together. We've actually partnered with Marissa and Cheese Please for local deliveries. So if you're in Grimsby, Lincoln, St. Catharines, we will actually deliver a beautiful cheese box. Jump on her Instagram; they're incredible. And we'll deliver it for free with a minimum 2 bottles of wine. So if you live in that area, you can jump on our website, place that order. I highly recommend sparkling all the time, but grab whatever you want. The next order, I believe, is going out on Thursday, so March 4th, and we always try and get the orders in by Tuesday. So that's kind of our little pitch with you, Marissa. But for people who don't know you, where can we find you? How can we get your cheese? What's next on your docket? Like, are there things coming up?
So you can find us at either cheeseplease.ca, our website, or Cheese Please Niagara on Instagram. We're most active on Instagram. We typically just service the Niagara region, but soon we're going to be servicing the Hamilton region as well. A couple of fun things coming up they're pretty secret right now, but some cheese subscriptions to Conquer, Ontario are coming up. But throughout the summer, you'll be able to see us at hopefully your winery and a couple others to enjoy some nice cheese and wine pairings.
Awesome. Yeah, I actually had a box gifted to me a couple of weeks ago, and it blew my mind. So
amazing.
Keep up the great work. And then Ed, what's happening at Flat Rock? What's the future hold?
Well, there's lots of stuff always. I think coming up, we're really excited. We love doing these Zoominars, we call them, and we've really themed some months. And next month, I'm super excited because we're talking about international. So we're going to be doing a bunch of Instagram lives and things like that. But we're really going to have I think at the end of the next month, we're going to do another one of these where we send the wines out. We've got some unbelievable wines. Remember that 95-point decanter wine I was talking about? It will be available for the pack for the end of March. Well, am I not supposed to mention that?
I'm just kidding. Go ahead.
I think I just got in trouble.
No,
you're giving away secrets. Did I do something wrong? You wanted me to talk about what's exciting coming up. I'm excited about it. And there's I would argue, an unbelievable Pinot that we did, our 15 Gravity, which we made nothing of because it was a short harvest, but the wines were spectacular. And a 93-point Riesling. So there's some amazing wines in our next thing. So I just think, what excites me about what we're doing is really engaging with, whether it's with cheese, with Marissa, whether it's with international people, and looking at how we do internationally. There's a whole bunch of super cool things that we're doing coming up. We believe at Flat Rock that it's not just about the wine, it's about the experience and making what we do more and more fun and more interesting. So we're super excited about that. And I just got to make a comment about Chris. Chris is in the chat room about riddled paired with gas station samosas. For those of you who don't know, there is, if you want to buy some of the best samosas anywhere, it is in a local gas station that's almost right around the corner from the winery. You would never think it, but they're unbelievable, really, truly, and they would definitely go with riddled for sure.
Yeah, no, it's true. It's called regional gas and variety. It's like maybe I shouldn't say this, but I feel like it's on Schitt's Creek. It's like this little tiny place you stop by and then you get wowed by the food. And so just to summarize what Ed was saying, because we had a couple of comments to keep doing these, and we totally will. We do plan to keep doing these, even once things return to normal. So every Wednesday night in the month of March, we'll be having an international guest on, whether that be a winemaker from Australia or a wine. I know we have an author, I won't spoil that surprise, but a really famous author out of the UK. Tune in every Wednesday night, and then it's going to culminate in another one of these Zoominars with another special guest. And like Ed alluded to, for the first time in probably, 5 years, we'll be putting out a really special pack that includes the 2010 Riddled, which is the 95-point wine that was named Canada's Best Sparkling. It's also going to have our 2015 Gravity, which was 92 points in Wine Spectator. It was the highest rated Canadian Pinot Noir. Haven't released that in a few years. And then our recent 93-point Riesling. This is the first time we're telling anybody about that pack, and because of obviously the rarity, there's only 25 available. So it's up on our website right now. You can register for the Zoominar now. You can buy the pack now, I think that pretty much sets the scene. That'll be the last Thursday of March.
It'll be an awesome tasting.
Yeah, I cannot wait for that one. And so I would just like to thank everyone who joined. I'd like to thank the panelists, Marissa, for taking the time out of your day and for pairing us with some amazing cheeses. And then Ed, Allison, any parting words from you guys?
I do. Honestly, Marissa, I think what you do is so cool. I think that I love charcuterie. It's always what's for lunch when we go to the lake, and it's just like throw something together and make it beautiful. And I think that what you're doing is really cool, and you're pivoting to your COVID friendly. And I really think wine and cheese and food go together so well. I think it's just awesome, and I'm so happy that you're partying with Flat Rock, and we get to enjoy your amazing product. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you for having me. That means a lot.
Yeah, no, thanks, Marissa. We really enjoy building strong partnerships with those people in the community. It's one of our core principles and core values at Flat Rock Cellars. So it's great that we can do this with you. And I just want to conclude by saying, Jacob, make sure for the March tasting, you send me home with 2 bottles of each, just in case one of them gets corked.
Yeah, well, and I just popped the link to it. In the chat. So if anyone wants to go and grab it, like I said, there's only 25. You can join us without the wine. Jump on and register. But if you do want to get a hold of those, do it now. And I think that's it. All right. Thank you guys so much for joining. We'll see you. Allison's hosting an Instagram Live tomorrow with Chef Ryan Crawford. Then we'll be on every Wednesday in March, and hopefully we'll see you all again for next Zoominar.
Thanks, everybody.
Have a great
Cheers.
night.